call this evening's meeting of the Town of Shelburne Development Review Committee to order. It's November 15, 2017. Welcome, everybody. This is our opportunity for public comment, if anybody has any to make. It's also my time to ask if anybody has any conflicts this evening that would keep them from sitting. Yeah, Quinny. Yeah, you're going to not sit on Quinny, so,
Right.
Okay, great. All right. We'll move on in the agenda to approval of minutes from our last meeting on November 1st. The minutes were quite long this time, 17 pages. Does anyone have any amendments, edits, or suggestions to make with respect to those? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second, please. All in favor? Aye. All right. Okay. Do you have that, Mary Ann? Great. So the next matter on the agenda this evening is pre-application. It's a pre-application conference regarding a 5-lot subdivision scheduled for 7:15. We're a little ahead of schedule. 5-lot subdivision, which under the current zoning regulations will be reviewed under the PUD requirements. The application is by Mr. Peter Ewing. The property is located at 300 Cheese Factory Lane, partially in South Burlington as well. Is there anyone in the audience this evening to talk to us about that application? Yes, great. Oh, okay, come up to the microphone, Mr. Ewing. And since you'll be giving some testimony in connection with the application, I'm going to swear you in. If you would raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with your testimony this evening?
I do.
Thank you. Could you state your name for the record?
Pete Ewing.
Okay.
And currently live in Westford, Massachusetts. Grew up on Cheese Factory Road in Shelburne.
Okay. And from the review of this, it looks like you're trying to create a 5-lot subdivision there?
Yes. And I'll describe the
Mary Ann,
lots.
can you get the lights? One. The close one. That's good.
It's a little hard to see, but the first lot is 48 acres plus or minus. That is basically along that blue line, Muddy Brook over here. That's South Burlington town line right there.
Yep.
And this is all Shelburne. And that line for the nature, this is what we call the Nature Conservancy parcel, and the plan is to sell this to the Nature Conservancy as the first parcel. The University of Vermont partnered with Nature Conservancy, and they did a 72-page analysis of its natural habitat, and it has many natural attributes that really lend well to being added to the Nature Conservancy lands. And of course, they already own here. On that property line is Nature Conservancy, and down here on this property line is Nature Conservancy, and Shelburne Pond is all right down here.
Were you referring to lot 5?
I don't know what numbers you have on it. This is the Nature Conservancy parcel, 48 acres.
Your lot. Which lot is going to conserve?
I don't think it's a numbered lot.
It is.
It's way over.
Actually, this is only the top of it. We don't have, is a different map?
Yeah.
Can you bring up the other map of the whole farm? Okay, there we go, that's better. So this is all Nature Conservancy over here. This is Nature Conservancy. You can see here, I'll get out of the way. This is all Nature Conservancy over here, and Shelburne Pond's down here. That property line here is like basically right here. So this right here.
Hang on a minute, Mr. Ewing. Andy, do you have your pen?
I do.
Yeah.
You want it or?
Yeah, no, we're gonna give it to Mr. Ewing, and he has to be by the mic.
Oh.
So,
You want me over the mic? That's
well, the mic is removable
Like
too,
portable.
so you can take it out of its stand. But let's see how that works, if you can get it to work. There
There
we
we
go.
go.
Oops.
Okay, so that other line goes right there. So, oh, okay, there it is, I found it. So the Ewing Farm, actually, at this point in time, it is, I'll start up in this corner. And it goes down here, and up here,
Wow.
all the way down here. And the Nature Conservancy parcel is right here. All of this. And that's what the 72-page report refers to all that. This is the bread and butter farm over here. They've leased our farm since the Ledukes went out of business in 2000. Well, the Ledukes went out of business, I think, in 2003. And in 2009, the bread and butter farm came into existence and bought the former Leduc farm. And the second parcel is what we call the agricultural parcel, and that'll be purchased in.
Can you show us that one, the second parcel?
Yeah, starts right here. It's a little odd shaped here. And then this little piece here, and that would come all the way out here. Then here this is the
Okay.
Nature Conservancy
Got it.
VLT parcel, and Alan Carnetz from the Vermont Land Trust is here tonight, and he been involved with this from the very, very beginning, and so he'll probably also be able to talk to any questions that might come up in regards to the TNC parcel. But I know that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish with the parcels. Okay, so that's the second parcel, and so again, it would be purchased with one of the partners of the VLT, and with help through the I'm sorry, the bread and butter with help through the VLT. So that's parcel number 2, and then what's that?
Yeah, the map has the 3 lots on it.
Okay, and then here's the 3 other proposed lots are in Shelburne, 20.58. Actually, I think it's actually part of that. This parcel is in South Burlington, but there's 18 acres in Shelburne, and it's a proposal for 3 lots meeting all the town's zoning requirements, disallowing wetlands and steep slopes, which have been delineated. Trudell Consulting Engineering put this map together and did all that work, and they've done some preliminary work on lot lines. I'm not sure I like them exactly the way they are. I do like the 3 lots. I'd make some small changes, but for the most part, that's what we have.
If I understand correctly, Mr. Ewing, there would be 3 lots in Shelburne and 2 lots in South Burlington. That's the current proposal.
That's correct. So we also, our family also owns this 8-acre parcel in South Burlington, and this, and then this is all South Burlington right here. And this little piece right here is creates a kind of a little, just a little odd lot, which I've already purchased from my family. I don't think there's any more permits. After talking with Ray Belair, we really aren't required to do much more to obtain permits through South Burlington. A little bit of work, but it's mostly done because of state law and it being on the town line. It sort of grandfathered as separate lots. So those are pretty much done. But so again, here's the 18 acres in Shelburne. And then here's the lot lines that our consulting engineers came up with, which I would make some minor changes to, but that's pretty good indication of what I think we would do. And again, we've been on the phone with and emailing with Caitlin and Dean about your zoning requirements, and we don't see any problem meeting your zoning requirements.
What is the plan here in terms of development? You're gonna have 3 lots for what purpose?
Residential houses.
In your family?
Uh,
Or
no, to be sold. Now is probably a good time for me to step back and give a little bit of history. The farm was purchased in 1960 by my parents, John Ewing and Linka Lee. They got divorced in 1975, but they maintained joint ownership of the farm. My father is very conservation-minded and, you know, was always working in that direction. And my mother was as well, but they didn't see eye to eye or agree on the minor points and the details in recent years. And so all these years, nothing happened with the farm, which was fine. You know, it stayed as open space, and, you know, we've always had farmers on the land for the most part. But there was a major log jam there, and that was okay until their health began to fail. And I hired an attorney for other matters, and he was looking at the farm. He said, you know, this is going to get messier, and it's going to be more difficult if your parents don't come to some decisions while they're alive. And so we began to go through this process, and the first thing that we did was to contact Alan Carnetz at the Vermont Land Trust and see if, and also Gail Albert with the Shelburne Natural Resources. I'm not sure if I got the name right, but and so we brought them in first. And but one of the major disagreements between my parents was that my mom wanted to have a few lots to sell at market rate, and so we had to finally get to that point where there's some agreement on that, and my father is in agreement with that at this time. And so that's where we are. The other thing is that I just talk a little bit about the land appraisal. We had Justice DeVries out of Middlebury do the appraisal. He's done a lot of work with the Vermont Land Trust, and that was completed, I think, about a year ago. And so that was our starting point. And and also with Alan Carnetz and John Binhammer then looked at, and the very starting point was looking at the natural what would be a good candidate for what acres would be a good candidate for natural area, and what acres would be fit into the criteria required for agriculture in the Vermont Land Trust. And so that was our initial starting point. I know the farm very, very well, and I've been managing the farm for about 15 years since the Ledukes went out of business, and we had to stay current use and everything. And so I have always known, and my father have always known, that if there was going to be any houses, that the main objectives were to push them away from Shelburne Pond and push them closer to Cheese Factory Road and other houses. And so that really was a primary objective. And it actually works really well, because if you know the land as well as I do, and I think Alan knows it very well at this point, that the agricultural lands are that large. Could you back up maybe to that other large map? The agricultural lands are, primarily this hayfield. It's a beautiful hayfield right here. I don't know how many acres it is. It's just a monstrous field. So that was prime agriculture. There's good hay right through here. And then the rest of it is tends to be more pasture. But this area right here is very rocky. It has only a little bit of land that could be used for cattle, for grazing, but not that much. And even this part of the field's nice, but this is very rocky through here, right where the label is. And this is what I call cow pine. Back in the 60s, when I was, in grade school, these trees were very young, and they were heavily browsed by cows. We've had the forestry plan done. I've actually tried to sell trees. I was able to finally, the only economic value I could find for this particular lot is chipping. And I tried, we did some thinning and cutting, and we had a lot of trees on the ground, and I tried to sell them to the wood chip power plant, and it never happened. But so this has no economic value. The timber here is just it's virtually worthless. This is all hardwood, and it's over 100 years since it's been logged. And, well, we have no record of it ever being logged. There's some really huge trees in here. And so that's one of the reasons why, I guess they refer to this as like an upland forest, as it, you know, the elevation rises up here from Muddy Brook. And of course, this is the north flowing outflow of Shelburne Pond. So, at any rate, this is all, this area in particular and down here was determined to be, you know, of strong interest for the Nature Conservancy, and I'll let Alan maybe describe that and the agricultural area. So again, we started with what was to be conserved for natural resources, but then, you know, we've always, you know, my father and I have always realized that if there were going to be houses anywhere, they'd be here because they're close to the road, they're away from Shelburne Pond, and because this piece of land is really, you know, like I say, rocky, cow pine, no, you know, no, you really can't hay that area, except for possibly down here a little bit, could still be hayed. And that's pretty good background right there. I guess the only other thing I'd say is about the appraisal that we had done. The figures are in my report, and you know, my father wanted to make a gift, which is you know, attractive to, you know, facilitate the whole process and get these lands into you know, the management of the, or control of the Nature Conservancy, UVM, and VLT. And as a result of his gift, we've, you know, I mean, it's a very sizable gift, and I think it's, you know, 38% of the value. And, you know, that was another point of contention with my mother. She didn't like the size of the gift, and so, or that there was any gift at all. And so she demanded that these lots be retained by the Ewing Farm to and sold, and, you know, be available for us to sell in order to sort of, in some degree, to compensate for the size of the gift. So that's kind of where that stands and where their disagreements were and how we've tried to work out a compromise.
Well, thank you. Does Kate, anything to add? I'll work my way down.
So this is just a pre-application conference, so it's just establishing that there was some time taken in laying out the lots. Moving forward, South Burlington is probably going to be pretty heavily involved since their primary access is coming through South Burlington. Marla Keene is actually here from South Burlington. And there's probably going to need to be some clarification on the buffers that are going to be required if there's lots spanning both towns and things like that. But overall, he meets the density requirements. He's giving far more than the 33% open space that's required. So there's no outstanding issue at the moment with the limited amount of information that we have, but.
There are no, but the way the applicant has done this, just so I understand, is the lots that we're being asked to consider for purposes of subdivision are actually all in Shelburne, with the exception of the lot that's really not defined as part of this subdevelopment.
Yes, so, so all the lots are in Shelburne, whether or not those lots, I thought you had said, lot 3 and lot 2, that's on the plans. They're not formally subdivided between South Burlington and Shelburne?
I'm not sure where you're referring to. Well, this is, okay. I can work with that one.
Yeah, these two in here.
All right, this 8-acre lot was formerly owned by my mother and her second husband, Sawyer W. Lee, Link R. Lee and Sawyer W. Lee. And it was a strange thing. I guess this is what you call a hammerhead lot. And how it ever came into being, we'll have to go back to the town of South Burlington and ask where, how, or why. But at any rate, it worked out 20 years later. But so we subdivided this in South Burlington earlier this year, and this is my mother's house. The lot was reconfigured, and I think it came before this board, and it's a new 9-acre lot here.
Yeah, oh, okay, that
Yeah,
I knew. I thought you were talking about lot 2 and lot 3, so that's,
Okay.
that's my misunderstanding.
Well, there's a lot of lots, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of explanation. So there's the new 9-acre lot, formerly 2 acres here,
Yeah.
But we were allowed by state law to subdivide on the town line, and we did. And that created this 8-acre lot in South Burlington. And again, that was owned by, my mother bought that from the farm, bought my father out, so that was in my mother's and my stepfather's name. And then that left this 11 acres, 11 or 12 acres, I don't really know, piece in South Burlington. And I was very interested in purchasing a piece of land, and when the way it just happened to work out very nicely that what was of interest to the Nature Conservancy, and which documented in that 72-page report, they drew the line right down here through the wetlands, and that was perfect. And that just created this. This is part of the Ewing Farm. It is in South Burlington, and it was basically left over. And there's a little small piece here where I can actually probably put up a camp or seasonal home.
Okay, so, all right, I mean, Mary's correct, we're only looking at Shelburne lots at the moment, but I thought I misunderstood and thought you were saying Lot 2 and Lot 3 were still not subdivided from each other. I'm sorry, do you see the mouse?
Okay.
There is, so I thought you had said that this lot and this lot, I only have access to our parcel information, so.
They haven't been subdivided yet,
Okay.
but we will subdivide on the town line.
Sure. What you need to do, though, is introduce yourself so we have a clear record and speak into the microphone.
I'm Marla Keene. I'm the Development Review Planner for the City of South Burlington. The question I had for you is the triangular parcel and the parcel to the right that you're referring to as 11 acres. I just wanted to clarify, are you saying those are subdivided, or those you would like to subdivide those? And I don't want to derail this into a South Burlington conversation today, but just
I
so
would
I
like
understand
to-
where to go
I
from
would
here.
like to
Mr.
subdivide.
Ewing,
Okay.
you have to get back to the microphone. Sorry, we need
I would
to.
like to
There's
subdivide.
another microphone right there. Is that on? So you can grab that one. Yeah, it's on for our viewing audience, so it may not amplify your voice, but it's going to go into the TV. There you go.
Can I sit down?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So this has not been subdivided from this yet.
Okay, thanks. Just
But I
to let
didn't-
you know, we should talk about it.
I have talked with Ray Belier
Okay.
extensively about it, but would be happy to further, go into it as deep as you want to go into it.
Great, that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Just the degree to which any development on South Burlington impacts Shelburne is the degree to which we're
Right.
interested.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I bring it up, but.
Let me just summarize again. This gets created for a couple of reasons. If the Nature Conservancy buys this piece, and if we establish the property line here, then it gets cut off, which is the intention. The Shelburne South Burlington line, our attorneys have told us, and we've been told many times, we can elect to make that a property line if we wish, and we will. And then so that's here. And then the third, it is a separate piece of land. So on this side it's the Ewing Farm, and on this side it is Link R. Lee, Sawyer Lee Trusts. And of course Link R. Lee is also joint owner with John Ewing of all the Ewing Farm. Oops, all of this.
Got it. Jeff, do you have any questions?
No, it seems pretty well thought out.
Thank you. Mark?
I do not have any questions.
Joanna?
Good. I do not.
Okay, so there's probably other people in the audience to speak to this application this evening, so let's move on to the Vermont Land Trust, and then Gail, I'll get to you as well, and then anybody else who might be here.
Sure. I'm Alan Carnett with the Vermont Land Trust.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with any testimony you should give in this application?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I'm the Champlain Valley Farm Director for the Vermont Land Trust. I just wanted to just say a few words of support. We've been working with Peter and John and the Ewing family for a year and a half, maybe. And we brought in the Nature Conservancy, John Binhammer, my cohort with the Nature Conservancy, couldn't be here tonight. But brought in John, brought in UVM and their students, and they're pretty impressed with that old growth piece. I mean, it's an old growth as far as Vermont. I mean, there's no true, most of Vermont, as we know, has been logged, but it's pretty pristine as far as that forest track right there. So, and then Bread and Butter Farm, obviously we worked with them on the Leduc piece, and they're very excited about buying that other piece that abuts them. And it would be conserved. It would have a land trust easement on it, a perpetual easement. We're actually planning to come, as Gail Albert knows, coming to the select board for some other support from the Conservation Fund to help make all this work. So that's all I wanted to just say. Like I said, we've been working on this for about a year and a half, and at this point, we think this is a good outcome so far. That's all. If you have any questions? Sure.
There'll be public access to the conserved land?
Yes.
And how's that done?
Okay, first of all, we had a lot of discussion on that, and I think
Mr. Ewing, I'm sorry, the microphone.
we had a lot of discussion about access to the conservation lands, and it's very important, and we intended to make sure that happened. And now, historically, as I'd said, the Nature Conservancy had already purchased from us in 1970 the north shore of Shelburne Pond, as well as along Muddy Brook. And so they, of course, required access at that time. So the Nature Conservancy already has a right-of-way that runs straight down through here. And it's the old farm road. If you can, it's kind of hard to see on this map, but on most maps you can actually see the old, tractor road.
Oh, yeah, I can see it.
And that has got Nature Conservancy right-of-way. And we continue to maintain that road and keep it open, and we invite them out to come out as much as they want.
Hang on, so Nature Conservancy, is that viewed as the public, or is that viewed as the Nature Conservancy organization?
TNC UVM.
Yeah, TNC UVM, I can't speak to that. I mean, I know they maintain that, and they can open it for public use, but no vehicle, no motor vehicle use. And I know that the Bread and Butter folks, we've talked about doing some other trails, some public access trails that would come through their property. As you may know, when we negotiated the easements on Bread and Butter Farm, there are some public access trails. They're not developed at this point, but they're in the easement. And those easements could be developed by TNC at some point into a public trail. Yep.
And the second access, of course, South Burlington, we hope would be involved with some funding. And so we wanted to give them access as well. And to this side of the property, it just makes sense that there ought to be some access from this side. And the right-of-way that goes to these 18.5 acres runs, you have that in your packet, but at any rate, that right-of-way runs right along our northern property line. Well, I should say that's we have a new right-of-way here that's on the Sawyer Lee and Lincoln Lee property. And then it turns down here and comes into here. But there has, up until just recent years, there was a defined wagon road right through here. And so I had always wondered if the original, because I heard the original cheese factory road had been moved like 70 years ago. And there's evidence of that on the Leduc farm. There's places over here over a river where there's an old culvert where you can see that the road had been moved several hundred yards. And so I'd always wondered if there had been a wagon road right along here. But at any rate, it needs some brush clearing, but it just runs really nicely right out here. And so I offered that to give that right away across. It would just stay in our new right of way until it got to about the tree line, and then it would continue on and follow the property line until it gets out to here. Onto the nature.
And I could just add on that note, one of the issues with any public right-of-way, as you know, is parking. People are going to go there, they're going to want to use it, where are they going to park? And we're trying to work that out right now. I mean, if there's parking, we're talking 2 or 3 parking spaces, not a big area that's going to be available, but I think we're trying to work that out, that
Yeah.
there's some parking there. Because a lot of times we have these public access pieces and, it prevents people from using it.
We do get a steady stream of visitors. Somebody was out there today, I don't know who it was, but,
A hunter, maybe?
no, I don't
No.
know. But, I mean, we've just had a lot of, interest in the property from,
Yeah.
conservation, maybe in people.
And
but
UVM
other
students
neighbors.
would use this piece for sure.
UVM students have come out. So one idea that Alan and I have talked about is us allocating some parking here, 2 or 3 spots right here, directly adjacent to, the entrance, and it would be right on the new right-of-way that goes to the east.
In South Burlington, though, that would not probably be in Shelburne, so anyway.
Right. But we would expect that, it's right on the town line, we would expect that anybody that wanted to walk the property would park here and then walk along the TNC road or along this new right-of-way over here. So this is what we've discussed this far. Of course, we haven't got far enough to really allocate that, but we got a 60-foot right-of-way, so that's plenty wide enough for, 3 spaces, right alongside the road. It's going to be, we're not going to build a wider road than we have to. It's going to be a gravel road, so I don't know if that would be 12 or 18 feet, whatever the towns require. And so that'll leave plenty of room in the 60-foot right-of-way. So the plan would be to push the actual driveway up as far north as possible and then have a few parking spaces right here. And that works out good next to my brother purchased this property and his wife. And this is open field right here, and it's flat, and so it could work.
Anything else from the board? Gail? Swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I'm Gail Albert from Shelburne Natural Resources Committee, and I don't have a lot to add except that John Ewing had approached me about this property probably 4 or 5 years ago, just at a gathering where I met him. And we on the Natural Resources Committee were particularly excited to have this because of its proximity to Shelburne Pond and the diversity of the property, having both forest and ag land. And so we had approached the select board a number of years ago, anticipating that this would happen and trying to set aside some funds that are in our open space fund, and hopefully they'll still be there when we get this finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Oh, yes.
So from the Shelburne side, will there be public access to the property through Shelburne Pond?
I am not sure whether there will be public access or not, but I would think that that's still to be worked out, and it may be a requirement that the select board places upon us. It's not something that we necessarily see as pertinent to every piece of property. I believe that Bread and Butter Farm is planning to graze some cattle there, so there would have to be some care, and there may be some, because there's going to be that kind of joint use of the property, there may be access through the Bread and Butter side as well as this side. But with Peter's commitment and the Ewing family commitment, I think that we can find ways to be able to do that. I can't speak to it at this moment.
I could add a little bit to that. Well, the Bread and Butter Farm is right here, and of course, they have quite a bit of parking, and they have a farm store, if you haven't been out there. So it's a retail operation, so they have parking, and they access the property through here. They just kind of come along here, and I'm not sure, somewhere in here, they come back out. So, yeah, they've already have sort of a tractor road that they've put in.
And
And trails.
plenty of public access.
In case you're wondering, there is no other access from any other direction, except for possibly in the middle of the winter when, with a foot of ice over all the swamps. But, this whole region, it's interesting, is virtually landlocked by swamps except for from the north. but there are huge swamps over here on this side and all the way around here, and so it's an interesting piece of property from the amount of swamps that are around.
Anything else from anyone? Great. Mr. Ewing, I'm going to ask that you make sure that you give that pointer back to
Yeah.
Andy in the back of the room. So I don't think we take any action at this point. So thank you for coming. It seems like it's an interesting proposal and piece of property. Okay. The next matter on our agenda is application CU 17-14. It's the application of Reynolds Garnett for a conditional use review of a proposed two-bedroom apartment in an existing barn. The property is located at 135 Pond Road in the rural district. Is anyone here in connection with this application? Come on forward, sir. I hope I said your name right, Garnett?
Yes.
All right. Could you raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with this application?
I do.
And your name again, please, for the record?
Reynolds Garnett.
Why don't you tell us about what you're up to?
We basically have a barn there. Previous owners had it as, you know, they kept their horses in there. Very nice condition. We don't ever plan on having horses and want to make it nicer and have places for guests to stay when they visit. And it's kind of what we're up to.
Is this a photo of the barn or or sort of a facsimile?
I can't see. So.
It's okay, it's this.
That's as it was being built. Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Looks like that.
Does anybody on the board have any questions of Mr. Garnett? So,
Is the purpose of this apartment, is this a rental or No. family or in-law or? Don't plan on ever renting it. We just have 2 kids, gonna have more, and people come stay and want to have a place for them to stay.
send the kids to the barn.
Nothing to.
Yeah.
I think you got it backwards.
And is it going to be an apartment on the upper level? Is that the idea?
Lower level,
Okay.
and then upper level, like open living. Just, it's like halfway, the upper level's like half to 3/4 of the way, and then it like opens up top, so it's already open like all the way to the roof.
Anything to add? Well, thank you for coming. At this point, I would move to finalize the record, along with moving to close the hearing with an indication of approval of the application, with the only condition being that you get a zoning permit before you begin construction. Can I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you for coming this
Cool.
evening, Mr.
Thank you.
Bennett. Okay, the next matter on our agenda this evening is application SUB 1602. This is continued from November 1. And it's the application of Snyder Custom Homes for preliminary plan approval of a 91-unit subdivision located at 0 Spear Street, the old Quinney Golf Course. Is there anyone here this evening to testify in connection with this? Chris, okay, a whole bunch of people. Why don't we start? Who wants to take the mic first? Chris? Swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth in connection with this application?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Snyder, can you state your name?
Yes, Chris Snyder, Snyder Homes.
Okay, and if you're going to testify from afar, can you make sure you have a mic?
Yes.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your time again tonight. And I know that we have some people from the town here to talk about some specific questions that were raised at the last hearing. And I know that we narrowed our discussion quite a bit over the last hearing, and really came out with what I had was 6 items that needed to be reviewed further.
Can I stop you right there, Chris?
Yes.
And make sure we're all on the same page. Why don't you tell us what those 6 items are? Because honestly, I didn't make it home between work and here, so I remember that we had roads, we
So-
had sidewalks, we had lighting.
So we have roads, street names, sewer, street lighting, stormwater, in terms of providing access to storm ponds. And the 6th item was the bike path along Spear Street.
Weren't we also interested in addition to street names and the width of the street?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. In one location, well, I guess there's really 2 questions. There was one within the small loop, Street D.
Yep.
The question was, what is the size of the road within Street D? And then also, what are the road widths throughout the rest of the neighborhood?
Okay, having said that, I just want to make sure we have clear on what the issues are, so I want to inquire of my colleagues. Does anyone else recall that there was anything else we wanted to hear back from Snyder Homes on?
There was discussion 2 to 3 meetings ago on the north side of the property, how to deal with checking the problems that are there from excessive stormwater runoff from the roofs and stuff. Are you going to talk about that?
I think we can talk about that.
But that's going to come in the next series.
Oh, hopefully there's not a next series, but I think we've addressed that with there's a proposed catch basin right there, yard drain that will be great. So we're going to provide grading to that
Okay.
yard drain.
So you're going to talk about that?
We can.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, I just want to make sure we were all on the same page.
Yeah.
And why don't you continue? You pick whatever issue you want to address first, and then we'll stay on that issue until it's completed. So if there's another witness in the room, then, what? We want to get our municipal employees to be able to
Yes.
go home.
I was assuming that we were going to start.
All right.
I guess probably if we could start with road width.
Okay, that'd be great.
And we can answer
Okay.
those
And
questions.
we just got handed a bunch of stuff, so I want to make sure we're all queued up. This street types, is this in connection with road width?
There's fire department comments. that
Yep.
was the red number on it.
Yep.
That's comments from the fire department. And then I gave you a portion of our subdivision regulations concerning waivers specifically, just so you're keeping that in mind while talking about streets. And then the other is just relating to street lighting, so you can put that aside
Okay,
for now.
thank you. All right. So we have a letter from the chief with respect to his position or the department's position. Why don't, I'm trying to figure out the best way to start. What we've received, and this will be part of the record, is a letter dated, no date on it, but we were just handed it today, and it says, Kate, in regards to the road widths in the Quinney development, the fire department is requesting all roads be no less than 28 feet wide. That width is necessary to accommodate engine 2 and its 18-plus feet wide truck with outriggers deployed. So I guess they wouldn't be able to do the stabilization. With roads 26 feet, the parking on both sides of the street, it would be difficult to set the truck up and still maintain maneuverability around the apparatus. This problem will be even worse in the winter with snow, et cetera. What's your company's response to that concern of the chief?
The streets, Andy Rowe with Lamro and Dickinson. You want-
swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth in connection with this application?
I do.
Right.
As shown on the plans, all the streets are 28 feet wide with the exception of the horseshoe one,
D Street.
D Street, correct. So the plans comply with the Public Works specs. The reason D was proposed at a lesser width because it was going to be private. We had talked last time about increasing it to 26 feet at least and making it a public street. So the DRB had asked that we get input from town staff on something less than 28 feet. So we're kind of looking for your direction on whether we proceed with the plans at 28 or do something else.
I'd like to hear from Jerry. Swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth in connection with this application?
I do.
Okay.
Jerry
Jerry
Wynette,
Wynette?
Chief of the Fire Department. So originally that D road was a private road. We had talked in depth with the different meetings that 26 feet would have been substantial because if there was ever an issue being a short road, they could be able to work both ways around that road. Going to a public road though, if it's going to be a public or a town road, we back the highway department in that all roads should be at least 28 feet. So that's our position there, is that if it's going to be a town road, then we'd like to see it 28 feet as well. And the reason for that is the quint that we have, like, as I said in the letter, it's 18 and a half feet with the outriggers out. You don't always get a perfect position, and if you have cars parked on both sides of the street, we have a very difficult issue of making sure the truck gets where it's supposed to be. And I'm assuming that the parking through this development's not going to have any restrictions as far as no parking on either side of the road. So a 26-foot road, and we have this issue in other roads in town right now, and my road being the biggest one I can bring to account is Martindale Road. We've recently done no parking through the S's on Martindale Road because of that same reason. The road width is an issue, and getting apparatus through there, even driving through there, is always an issue with cars on both sides. So 26 feet would be tight, especially, like I said, in the winter. Snowbanks don't get pushed back all the way. If cars are in the road, you're going to have probably less than 16 to 18 feet anyway. So.
Does anyone have any questions of the chief or Andy on this topic? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm just curious, if they were to say, parking only on one side of the road, what could the road width be?
Well, like I said, if it's a town road, we support the position of the highway department. So if they are requesting 28 feet, that's what we're going to back. But if there's only parking on one side of the road, it makes our job a lot easier, with the exception of if there's an incident on that side of the road that has parking. So it's,
I mean, because
26 feet, like I said, you have 18 and a half feet of fire truck. To get around that with hand lines and people moving, and then
Yeah.
cars on the sides of the road and trying to get other trucks around, it's always a tight spot with a road that short as far as a more or less a circular road. Blocking the road wouldn't be an issue because they have another way out. If it came down to that, we would obviously block the road for whatever purpose we needed to. So.
Because it seems like with garages and room for cars in front of the garages, the chance of a significant need for on-street parking seems like one side of the road could handle it. I don't know. It just seems like it's going to be a big, wide open, vast paved area.
The problem is we have is enforcement, I mean, there's no,
Yeah.
I mean, I live in a
But if there's
neighborhood
not
that
a-
gets clogged up all the time, and we've got really wide roads. We've got 30-foot wide roads, so
Yeah.
I'm only speaking to what I experienced, but
Is that a problem in general in Shelburne, Jerry?
It really is. Most of the roads in Shelburne, the developments, I mean, Paul can correct me, I don't think they're all 28 feet.
No, you guys are 26.
Yeah, and it really is when obviously in the winter we have no parking bans, but in the rest of the year, and like I say, Martindale Road is a perfect example. They basically wanted no park on either side of the road through the S-curve because it's very dangerous going through there, and sometimes getting an ambulance or a fire truck through there was very difficult. It's very tight. People don't park against the curb. Obviously, they're a foot or so away from the curb, so it makes everything even that much more narrow. So.
Anybody?
You're not allowed to park on the roads in the winter, right?
Right.
after midnight,
After midnight.
from midnight till 6.
I thought it was all winter. Just Day and
During the
night?
day, you can park.
You can park during the day.
You have your Christmas party, people park on the street.
Right,
And
Paul?
that's when the
It's
fires happen.
midnight to 6, right, Paul? No parking in the winter?
Yeah, but that doesn't work too well in this town. So they park out there all night, no matter what you do. A lot of them do, we can't find records enough to pull them anyway. We have a hard time going around them with a wing on and a plow.
Housing with this density, you have families with 16, 17, 8-year-olds with their own cars. All of a sudden, now you've got 3, 4 cars in a house. You're gonna have cars on the street.
Only over in that one loop where it's single family. I mean, you're not gonna have that in the cottage homes.
How many bedrooms are the cottages?
2 to 3.
It's amazing that Burlington still exists with its 20-foot wide roads.
Yeah.
Well, as a former Burlingtonian, I can tell you it's not easy, and I've replaced more side mirrors.
And I can assure you the Burlington Fire Department has issues with that as well.
Okay, any other questions of the chief?
Maybe this is just me not understanding, but you said if it's to be a town road, so why would it be different if it's to be a private road?
Because when we originally had our meeting, when they were discussing it being a private road, it was going to be maintained by either a board or an association, whatever. We were going to be acceptable with the 26 feet because I said we don't control that road. Paul doesn't plow the road. So if they want to go 26 feet, then we would obviously, having both accesses, we would not have an issue with that, only because we would definitely block the road if we had to. I mean, it wouldn't come down to making room for cars. It would be our road.
I'm going to want to hear from Paul about D Street in a minute. So, but if we have any more questions of Jerry.
I have a question. If a sidewalk is next to the road and there's a mountable curb, can the sidewalk, if it's kept plowed, count as overall width for?
No, only because we can't place
Has to be
outriggers on the
level.
sidewalk. The weight requirements for the outriggers would,
Okay.
they'd crush the sidewalk.
crush
So
the sidewalk.
they don't put any kind
Unless
of
the
stone on
sidewalk's
it.
built to road standards.
They'd have to be road specs, yeah. But even still, if it's wintertime, there's a snowbank between the road and the sidewalk, it totally takes away the purpose of having that.
But if there's no green belt between the sidewalk and the road, and
Right.
it's a mountable curb, and they're both plowed,
It's not recommended to set up a truck of that type
on,
on level,
Okay.
basically have one higher than the other.
yeah,
It takes away from the mobility of the ladder.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Paul, can you come on up, since we're talking roads? Can't make you, but you swear affirm everything you're gonna say tonight is gonna be true?
I do.
Can you state your name for the record?
Paul Goodrich, Highway Superintendent.
So, if D Street is private, it doesn't bother you, right? Because you're not gonna be plowing it, right?
Right.
But if it's gonna be public and it's only 26 feet wide, what happens as far as you're concerned?
We have a hard time getting by cars with a plow and a wing on. And there's cars parked on the side of these roads in every snowstorm, all day long. And we plow during the day, even if they were off at night. And when you try to go by a car and you got a wing hanging out a little bit, you got to sweat it out one way. You're taking out a mailbox, coming back, you might be dragging a car. And I've seen the time I've had to back out from developments because the cars parked on the side of the road. And so that's why we went, so Jerry was talking about, that's a 30-foot wide road in Martindale. And you put cars on that, and they stay away from the curb some, you have a hard time getting by them. And parking on one side, that's all you do is take all the cars from the other side and put them over on the one side of the road, so you got a line of cars the whole length of it.
Just as a frame of reference, how wide is my road, General Green? Do you know off the top of your head?
That's probably, well, you don't have any curbs over there,
No,
so you can drive that on the lawn, but you don't like that when we do that.
not at all.
But it's probably, it's 24 feet wide as far as blacktop.
It's only 24 feet. How about Harbor Road?
22 to 24 blacktop, but you got the extra shoulder, and you don't have any parking there on Harbor Road.
What about Nolan Farm Road? That always seems like a really wide.
It's probably 30 feet. That's in
Yeah.
South Burlington, right?
Yep.
30 feet?
Well, that's in South Burlington, I know that. I mean,
I'm guessing Martindale, Shelburne Park is all 30 feet.
Yep.
A lot of our roads are 30 feet wide.
I measured my road, it's a little, Long Meadow's just a hair over 30 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes anywhere from 29 and a half to
Varies, and
31.
It gets, the corners are pretty tight.
And when you put some cars on the side of that road right there, it's hard to go through with a snowplow wing on. So
Okay.
I worry about plowing, he worries about setting up fire trucks. And in the wintertime, if you get any snow, when we've had the years that probably some people haven't seen any snow in this little town, but I've seen it when there's been quite a bit. And you take that snow bank, that narrows your road up a few feet. You take that sidewalk plow that pushes that snow over here, so then we play games and we push it back to them every snowstorm. So that's where that all gets into a situation.
Okay. Any more questions of Mr. Goodrich? Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, wait a minute.
I-
Just when you thought you could get
I
away.
didn't have a question, but I didn't know whether you wanted to talk about street lighting or why Paul was here or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good idea, I guess, yeah.
And I didn't have any questions, but we've been talking
But
with,
thank you,
with
Andy.
Kate, but
Anything else on roads?
Not for me.
Yeah, not for me. Anything else? Okay, you want to go right to street lighting? Because then that, is there anything else that we need Jerry for? Because I don't know if, are you on duty tonight? Okay, well, then in that case, let's talk about lighting. And that would be the last thing that we got handed, the two-page sheet that we got handed. And you think, Paul, what do you think about lighting in a development like this?
I think you need some lighting in there, because that's what we're hearing every day of the week in this town right now. Since, we did take out all the streetlights in the town of Shelburne, because somebody had a brainstorm that we didn't need them. That was a good one. So now we took them all out, and we weren't smart enough just to take the light bulbs out and see how it worked. They took poles out and all. So now we're putting them back in. But we're not gonna touch that. And that's expensive, so if you're doing the project, you might as well do it now and get it over with, because we've been, people have called every day and want streetlights into Shelburne.
Well,
And we have some, there's one at the corner of school, and I think they should, if you're gonna do some streetlights, they should be probably what we're using now in Shelburne. And there's one at the corner of Davis Avenue and School Street, and there's a couple more around. They're on a pole and they hang out from the back. As you probably put up 1 million of them.
how about just at intersections? Is that good enough for you?
Some people want them in between there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's every 300 feet or whatever that number is.
The public works specifications say that they should be no more than every 300 feet.
Oh,
But then
really?
we also have
You
a
mean
very,
further apart.
no further apart than 300 feet.
Yeah,
But then we
but-
also have a streetlight policy that was developed afterwards, and it's quite a lot different, but our zoning regulations point to the public works specifications. So what trumps what, I'm not sure. The policy says the town manager approves lights, and the public works specification says it's the planning commission, but it's actually the development review board.
So if it's a public road and the light's gonna be on the right of way, that's when the town has say on it, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a question you can answer off the top of your head, Andy. If streetlights required every 300 feet, how many streetlights are gonna be in this development?
How many linear feet of road is there?
Well, the 300 feet doesn't, they would have to be so tall to span that distance. You know, because
right, at 300 feet, they wouldn't be providing continual lighting. They
No.
would be providing more of a
Yeah,
destination
spot. Yeah.
light to see in the distance to head for.
yeah,
Well, what's the applicant's proposal?
We're proposing to put a street light here at the southern entrance,
Yep,
a streetlight at the northern entrance, a streetlight at this intersection on the
Right.
stormwater pond side.
Yep.
Yep.
We looked at right
there.
here,
Yep.
That's a good one.
and we have talked about right here.
I thought there's one right at the, where D Street, one end of D Street meets the.
Yes,
Where
one-
it meets the main street.
that's correct. So there'd be one here at D Street, one here at this four-way intersection, one here, and one here.
I saw that, and I'm in agreement with, there's two things one thing I'll say is, I don't have any problem waiving the requirement of 300 feet here because there's sidewalks. I think the danger is when there's no sidewalk, at least on my street, and they eliminated all the lights, it's a wonder nobody got run over. You know, I stopped walking in my neighborhood at night. But I would like to see a light at each intersection. That would include a second light at D Street.
So you like one there?
Yep, I think intersections are important to illuminate, and I think, given the fact that people are gonna be coming off of, Spear Street into the southern entrance, and there's not a lot of queuing right there, like you might be kind of moving right along, I don't think it would be a bad idea to add a second light
At that
on the,
intersection.
at the northwest corner of that intersection.
Are you talking about right there?
Yep. That would be,
I
if
would-
I were building it, that's what I would like to see done.
Safety first.
So, I think that's in the interest of safety.
I want to know what
So-
Mr. Goodrich thinks about that proposal.
I think it's great. I just wondered how many people after they move in there are gonna want streetlights. I could care less. I mean, they took them out on our street too, and I don't have
That's
what I
right,
had.
well, we'll
originally.
just tell them to call the developer. Give
Well,
them Chris's
I
number.
was just gonna say that, so once this is all built up, are they willing to come back? And if we get a lot of complaints because you got some shaded areas, and that's what happened down behind Shelburne Park, the shaded areas, or whatever you wanna call it, the real dark areas, is when people wanted lights back. Some places didn't make any sense where they were to start with, and some places, and that was pretty dark in those areas. Long Meadow, Martindale, we still got requests every day from Martindale to put lights in that area.
I will say that during the Act 250 process, one of the items that we're going to be asked to consider is light pollution, and that I will, in most of the neighborhoods that we've done in the last 10 years, Act 250 has really requested that we eliminate streetlights, and in this case, you are going to have garages which are going to have lights in front and will light there.
People don't turn them on all the time.
Not all the time, but if you're home and you want somebody to come there, you will
That's fine.
turn them on. And so that does provide some lighting. But it will be an issue at Act 250. They will bring up that they probably don't like the idea of the every 300 feet.
That's why I'm looking at the safety aspect.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with the intersections all should be
I
lit
think
up.
the intersections,
I would agree with you.
when
That's
they've
fine.
done that in our, in my neighborhood, it made a big difference. It made it a lot safer. And we're lucky, we have, well, somewhat, we don't have underground power, so we have telephone poles, and they just bolted them back on the telephone poles. It was easy. But Martindale,
Poles and all,
yeah,
School Street, poles and all,
yeah,
gone.
took them about, what, a week or less?
Oh yeah, it took a long,
It was over.
gone in a couple of minutes, but it takes a while to put them up.
It's gone.
$15,000 a piece later.
Yeah, so that's my take on it, so.
Thank you,
Yep.
Paul.
So Andy, do you know how tall the lights would be in the development at the intersections, the poles?
They would typically be 20 feet, but that's another thing we'd like to get, and I'm not sure whether it's the DRB or the town manager, but what type of fixture would you like to see? We proposed one here. Paul just mentioned the one at the intersection of School Street and Davis, which I'm not familiar with, but if that's what the town is interested in having, we can replicate that.
The issue,
Solar one? Solar power?
I'm like, we got one of those, couple of those, and they don't work very
Works well, doesn't it?
No, very true. We moved it twice and still can't get it to work.
I wasn't suggesting the solar powered, but just, is there a particular fixture that
I think that's
is
the light pole
preferred
fixture right there.
versus a Cobra style fixture or, you know,
Well,
the old
reason
town and
is
country
we-
style?
We own these fixtures, the town takes these over, right?
Right,
So
and you don't want 6 different fixtures
Yeah.
that
the
you've got a
genius
special
of
order every
the
time.
last light thing was now there's a sign on all the telephone poles that have a light that says customer-owned fixture, so the town has to replace them now. So the question is do we want to have lights that are, so we have the same uniform lights throughout the town, or,
Yeah,
you know?
that's what we should have, because Green Mountain Power tries to talk with Hartsville. They fix them. We pay for it.
But you pay for it, so,
But maybe the applicant should speak with Paul and figure out what the most reasonable fixture is?
yeah. But you gotta remember,
Since
these
we
lights
have time.
last now, these LED lights last for like 28,000 hours or more, so it's quite a long time.
I do like those light
They're
fixtures,
nice
though.
fixtures, yeah.
Yeah, I've used.
And they make dark
those
sky
before.
compliant fixtures, and there's a plethora of
Can we do that?
fixtures you can
Is
buy
that
now.
okay to ask the applicant to chat with Paul some more and come up with a light fixture that makes most sense? As far, if the town's gonna take over the roads? Okay.
I would keep in mind, you know, when you're figuring the height, that a lot of these buildings are close to the road and, you know, a 20-foot, I wouldn't go higher than 20-foot. You know, it's going to feel out of scale.
But the 20 feet with the backlight shield option
shield.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can get those lights now where they've got the light,
Gail, I see you.
you know,
Right, the
focused into
LEDs
a
are
pretty
much
tight
more,
area. They can
Precise in their aiming.
Yeah.
tune them now, yeah.
Okay, just to keep track of where we are, we heard about roads, we have to figure out if it's gonna be 28 or 26. And we just talked about lighting. Does anyone have anything else on lighting? Gail, you wanna come forward?
I have to agree with Mr. Snyder on that, the requirement of the Act 250. And if you'll note in our report to you, we referred to, and I don't know the regulations as well as you do, but I believe it was in Article 8, Number 7, and 800, 2, 3, and 7. One of the things talks about the typical exterior lighting requirements and consistency with adjoining neighborhoods. And I know in Shelburne Heights, there are practically no streetlights whatsoever. And this is on the verge of the rural area where the night sky is really important. So I would just urge you to reconsider.
Oh, there's a second from the audience. We're gonna need your name though.
Yeah, I'll be talk about it.
Hi.
I'm George Mills.
Swear
I
for
do.
me.
I just that was a concern I had. It's so beautiful up there to look at the stars. It's one of the few areas in Shelburne that you can really see the stars nicely.
Okay.
And we don't see Burlington's light pollution on our side anymore that much for some reason.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in favor of supporting the 300-foot rule. I think it's important we consider having them at intersections. And if you select the lights properly and they're dark sky compliant, they don't give off a lot of light pollution and they get the job done.
We're talking 7 lights, I think. Max.
Yep, 7
1,
lights.
2, 3,
Yep.
4, 5, 6, 7.
And there's already lights at the Quinniosca Golf Course. I think there's one out in front of the clubhouse. Now, there's a couple of them there, I think.
Okay, what do we have to say about street names? I thought we figured that out last time.
We're going to propose those for final.
Thank
Where
you.
they're not required until final, and so we're going to
I already
propose them as
I'm
final.
thinking Mulligan, Eagle.
We only have 4 names, right? Birdie,
Birdie,
double birdie.
double birdie, bogey. Double bogey.
Okay, so that leaves, can we move on to sewer? And maybe we can, sewer.
So we
That was, do we have a letter or any information on that from,
Chris Robinson is here. So
hi,
he's
Chris.
standing
Sorry,
here,
so
and
it's
so
just
he can speak to it. So,
That'd be great.
you know, the general dynamic is that they've requested, Chris has requested that we go to the north. And we are working with some budding homeowner, neighbors about potentially connecting to Colomer. But Chris can speak to why the request to go north.
good evening? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth? And can you state your name for the record?
It's Chris Robinson, Water Quality Superintendent.
Welcome, yes.
So on the Quiniasca project, it's not the greatest map.
Can we
It
use the
shows
pen?
all of it. I do have these I can just pass out. It kind of doesn't do anything for the audience, but it kind of gives you a better idea of where everything is.
Great.
The orange is the gravity line that feeds to facility number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue line is the gravity line that feeds to facility number 1. Right now, if we were, what was proposed was to send the gravity flow to Webster Road, which goes to facility number 2, which goes through a series of pump stations in order to make it to the facility. It would have to run through our Webster Road pump station, then that gets pumped down to the Route 7 pump station by Karen's Auto Body, and then from there it gets pumped to facility number 2. By directing the flow to the north, once they hit Colomer Circle or Colomer Court, it'd be a gravity flow all the way to the facility without any pumping. So the request has been made to send the flow to the north. And also, just to let you know, if it is something that the town is going to be owning, one of the things is we're not excited about having to pump it multiple times. We're also looking at a consolidation study that we're currently doing right now to possibly looking at eliminating one of our facilities. My gut feeling is it's probably going to be facility number 2 that will be eliminated and turned into a pump station. So in the worst case scenario, you would have this development pumping 3 times to get to, not including the station they may have on their own property, on their own project, but current municipal pump stations, it would be pumped 3 times to get to treatment, where I'm proposing to head to the north, and it'll be a direct gravity flow straight to the facility without any pumping.
So that means a pumping station for the development, correct?
Correct.
So then, will that pumping station get turned over to the town, or how does that get maintained?
That is, right now, is what the intent is it'll be turned over to the town.
So that becomes another pumping station then versus a gravity flow to the south. You don't pick up a new pumping station, you just have to maintain the ones that are there.
There would still be a pumping station even if they
Heading south.
head to the south.
Yep.
Correct.
They need a pump station in there no matter what,
In,
north or south.
Correct.
In the development.
in the development itself.
And it's just
okay.
one pump station,
Got
right,
it.
Andy?
Okay.
Yep.
And,
Great.
okay.
And you're gonna and you're taking that over, Chris?
Yeah, just because of the number of residents in that area.
Where would the pump station be if it goes north, and where would it be if it goes south?
Same place.
North?
Not south.
And,
Right?
is it the same location?
If it goes to the north, it would
If it goes to the north, it's here.
Okay,
If it goes to the south, it's here.
okay.
And just while Chris is up here, what's the applicant's preference, or does the applicant care? From from a construction point of view, not a cost point of view.
Yes. Well, I think in both cases, there's a pump station. So from a cost point of view, that's neutral. Going to the south, there is costs associated with going and connecting down to the Webster Road. And going to the north, there's costs associated going to Collimer. So they're kind of a trade-off in terms of cost. I think, we have really 3 avenues that we could go in terms of the north. One along Spear Street, one potentially on this easement, and then potentially on someone's particular property. And it would be an easement that we would purchase and construct and install the sewer line, and then reestablish yard. The town has requested a 20-foot easement. I think what we're proposing is a 15-foot easement to potential homeowners that live on Collimer, and that we in perpetuity. But that's also the setback line on the lot lines in this neighborhood. So that 15-foot is really land that couldn't be constructed on anyways. So that's what our, I guess we're willing to go in either direction.
Do you have to get an easement? To go south, do you have to get an easement?
No.
Because you own up into the corner there?
Yes, more or less, yes.
So you've got enough capacity there, Chris, to take it either to the north, going
Correct.
through Collimer Circle.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yep. Okay.
And I think one of the questions really that came up, Mark, that you brought up was whether or not the transmission line within Collimer had the capacity to handle the flows from the potential neighborhood. And I guess that would be a question that, Chris could ask.
Chris just said he does, so
Okay.
I was curious. I mean, presumably if he wanted you guys to go that way, he's got the capacity, so.
Chris, what if the applicant can't get an easement?
My thought is, thinking long-term for the town, we would want it to go north no matter what. And there's been a proposal or a suggestion, just conversation, of potentially putting in what I would consider a temporary pump station on the north, where in the future the town may be able to extend the gravity line the way we want it, if the conditions today don't allow for that. And there would be a pump station that could then pump it. And then in the future, if we could eliminate that pump station and gravity through the town negotiating with a homeowner, or negotiating with a future homeowner, or just setting it up for the future.
So you want to extend this line up Spear Street or something? You're talking about the north. So
If we extended up North Street or up Spear Street, it would be a force main. Is that what you were thinking, Andy?
If
Yeah,
you went
it would-
south,
it
if you
would-
went south, if you extended south on,
If you extend it south, it's gravity.
okay.
But you're just concerned about the amount of pumping that wastewater has to go
I'm just
through.
looking out for the efficiency and the best, option for the department and the town moving forward, so.
How far away do you think the conclusion is on the plant 1, plant 2 termination?
I believe the report's supposed to be done in December. So we'll probably have something to present to the select board in the January timeframe, if we can get on the agenda.
Any other questions from the board members? I know Gail wants to add something. And sir, why don't you come forward? I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. You don't have to come forward. Chris can.
I'm still listening to everybody.
Oh, okay. Gail?
I will come
Are you speaking as a contiguous landowner at this point when you?
I'm not directly contiguous, but I do live on the lower part of Pearson Drive, on the west side of Pearson, to the far side of Potter, to the north side of Potter Place. And I am speaking in that context, and I'm speaking from the perspective of neighbors who have approached me because they knew I was on the Natural Resources Committee. I don't want to be perceived as in conflict in any way. Neighbors have expressed to me grave concern because of the cost of the bonding for the sewer line that went through the Collimer Circle neighborhood, and the idea that there might be 90 more houses, which is a larger number of houses than are actually in the neighborhood, using that line that Shelburne Heights is bonded for. So that was one concern. My own particular concern is one I've expressed to Chris in the past, not in relation to this project, but the sewer line actually has a manhole that's under my mailbox, and it smells all the time. And if it smells now, I wonder how it's going to smell when there are 90 more homes on it.
I don't know, but if I had to guess, probably less. I think a lot of the issues you're having is there's such a low flow in that area that stuff is going septic and it's starting to smell. So having more flow actually moving through there should reduce odors and stuff like that. It's usually when you have low use lines that you start generating the odors. And I think Kate might be able to actually talk a little bit more about the bonding issue and the financial aspect of.
I wouldn't mind putting a couple words in before you talk.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to get up, just tell us your
Okay.
name again, I'm
My
sorry.
name is George Mills. I am
right.
a budding property owner, I guess, is what you would say. You know, we have a special assessment district up there, and prior to the vote for that, we talked about this, our neighborhood building and bonding. And part of what we discussed with the town was the fact that we would not be connected, and there would not be other developments connected to that sewer line. So I didn't know about this until a couple weeks ago. I missed, unfortunately, the last meeting. And if it had been discussed before that, I missed it. But probably the largest concern to me as a homeowner up there, about the sewer anyway, is proration of the costs that we all bore to build that if the town's going to use it in this capacity. Because we're still paying, we got 5 or 6 more years, I think, of payments that we're making as a neighborhood. So I think for the neighborhood, that's something that needs to be discussed and somehow dealt with. Not sure proration's the right word, but I think it is.
So it's there's 5 more years left on the bonds?
I think it's 5. Kate may know that, but I mean, part of it was, you know, the fact that the neighborhood was hesitant to do this in some ways because of fear of large developments coming in around there if sewer was built. And I did have another question regarding the pump stations. If it goes south, is it going to be a larger pump station? Off topic from the special assessment thing, no. The pump station sizes, if it goes to the north and to the south, are they different? Are the pump stations relatively the same? Not knowing the answer to that, I was just kind of curious.
Yes, they'd be roughly equal. You know, the amount of homes that are being collected in the pump station at the north is roughly equal to the number of homes that would be served by the pump station to the south. So if everything did go to the north and there's a pump station here, it's picking up this area. The area that would be picked up by the pump station at the north is actually flowing gravity. So right now, going south, this area gets pumped up to this point, and then everything flows gravity. It really just gets mirrored in the north flow scenario. You've got the same number of homes in a different portion of the project being pumped to the north.
All right, thank you. I was kind of wondering that. And it kind of goes back to your earlier design where the houses were down a little bit further, and it actually would have made for a pretty good connection down lower with a gravity system going through the woods versus into the neighborhood. But anyway, I think those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mills.
Chris, isn't it in the plan to upgrade Webster Road in the near term, the pump station on Webster Road?
The station itself has been upgraded. Right now, it's the emergency storage capacity. It could be an issue.
That's what I read. Yeah.
And we haven't looked at everything yet, but there's a potential, there's not room for emergency storage to be placed there, so it would require a generator to be installed. So that's the other issue, is you start having developments come in like this that take up those the capacity in the. I did want to speak a little bit to this. I'm sorry, I forgot George. George had mentioned back when they did the special assessment for the Shelburne Heights neighborhood. The Shelburne, any extension right now of our sewer system has to be paid for by the users that are going to use that extension. So if, for instance, if they wanted to extend it down Mount Philo Road, whoever is going to be using it would have to pay for that extension. They would also have to pay impact fees for the capacity of the facility, our allocation fees. So one thing that they did in Shelburne Heights is they actually waived the allocation fees, which is over $300,000, was waived for that neighborhood. So, you know, that's a direct hit, of course, to our department being an enterprise fund. My predecessor was not happy about that, but it, you know, that's a whole different story. But so there was a reduction in the cost for Shelburne Heights to actually tie into the system, even though they did have to pay through bonding for that extension to be brought up. In Mr. Snyder's case, they're paying those fees, the allocation fees and stuff like that. So it's kind of a
Who resolves that in the town?
Existing problem that was dealt with, and that was why those impact fees were waived, because there were problems in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I went through like about a decade worth of minutes of select board. And yeah, Chris is right. There were quite a few fees waived. The problem, it was decided by the town, wasn't caused by the homeowners, but I don't know who exactly it landed on. But anyway, because of that, so Shelburne Heights is a special assessment district and they're bonded for a certain amount, but in recognition of the fact that it wasn't actually all the homeowners' faults, there's over $300,000 that's bonded to all sewer users. And the discussion was brought up about, you know, somebody literally wrote a letter saying any future development, and the select board didn't move on that as far as using your prorating. So any additional hookups into that line weren't going to end up paying anything towards the special assessment district large amount that Shelburne Heights is paying for. But as a sewer user, they're going to be paying for the smaller bond amount. Does that make sense? It's a little bit confusing. Okay.
It makes sense to me.
Okay, so I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact
I
number, so
remember.
I'll use a nice round one. So if it was $1 million total bond, Shelburne Heights Special Assessment District and all the sewer users within Shelburne Heights had to pay $700,000 over, I think, a 20-year period. And the other $300,000 was paid by anyone in the town that was connected to sewer.
Right.
So any future development will also, that is connected to sewer, so Chris's or anybody else will also be paying towards that $300,000, that's made up number, amount. But they didn't go so far as to say, even with the suggestion from somebody in Shelburne Heights, that any new connection into that line specifically in Shelburne Heights would need to bear any of the cost of that larger $700,000 bond. So it was thought out, and I completely, I have all the minutes printed, I'm happy to share them with you. But as far as I can tell, there wasn't any, and you know, it would have been impressive if they had thought that well out in advance, but there wasn't anything that said that anybody else connecting needed to pay towards that larger amount bond. But they will be paying towards the overall bond, in that it's $1 million and they're paying $300,000 versus $700,000. Is that better?
And those fees will be significant.
Certainly was verbally expressed that it wouldn't happen. I do know that, because I was there.
So what organization within town government addresses this? This isn't us, is it?
I don't know. No, it's not. If the select board was the one who went over all of this and did the bond and required that everybody in Shelburne Heights connect within 5 years, and certain houses were required to connect immediately if the septics are failing. So if anything, it would go to select board, but from everything I've read, it's kind of, it's pretty well laid out what would happen. So.
Anything else on sewer?
Just one quick other thing. That is, the Shelburne Heights sewer system up there is town-owned sewer. So just, that
But-
hadn't been mentioned.
Mr. Mills is saying that his neighborhood is paying a larger share of that cost,
Correct.
and now somebody else is gonna benefit from it. So that's a little hard to be,
Well, but they have to take that up with the select board, that's not our thing. It'll be a good diversion for them.
If they would like to keep it private and take ownership of it, I'd be happy to hand everything.
okay, I think that deals with sewer. And we can now
I
move on.
think the only question from us is, we've designed a system. We have to design a system in terms of getting approval from the DRB. It will change. It may change slightly where there is an easement, and I also need direction as to how to proceed from a layout. And it's hard.
Yeah, we'll give it to
We'll
you.
give you some direction.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
What's your timing? When are you trying to get final and wrap this up?
Well, they still have that water
You
issue.
still have the water issue. That's why I asked what the date was when they would be getting some type of indication about this consolidation plan. If it's coming in January, February, would
So-
it make sense to keep that on ice for a while until that's determined, or does it really matter?
I don't believe it would really matter. And this is just a report that's gonna come back to the select board on what they recommend doing. Whether or not that's something that the town can do
Active on,
within the
yeah.
next decade or two, we'll have to see.
There's no way to predict.
Decade or two.
And I think if we were conditioned that the issue needed to be resolved and for our final application, we would have time. But I think you're going to require for us to get preliminary plat approval, the layout.
Soon.
So it's a little sticky.
Right, because they have 6 months, right?
Yes, January 4th.
So how does
But
the,
wait.
It might be able to request, well, they can request another extension.
They might have to.
Yeah,
We have.
it.
We actually have requested an extension only due to the water scenario, but there seems to be some movement on that,
Yep.
and we're hoping that that will be resolved in the next 60 days. Right, by February. And so
Okay.
we have
I
requested
think
that. So unfortunately, you're
We
going to
can
have to see me
deliberate
again.
on it, and
Yep.
we'll make that part of our decision.
Yep.
does the water decision though impact your recommendation on how you would like the sewage to flow?
Not at all.
Okay.
Okay. So that leaves us with stormwater access ponds and then the bike path. Is there anybody here to talk about water access ponds other than the applicant? I thought, oh,
may chime in.
okay. That'd be fine.
I think we're in agreement with Chris Robinson that we'll incorporate a couple of, an access way to each one of the ponds in order to allow the town, if it goes this way, to take ownership and maintenance. And we've talked that out with Chris and have no problem with making that change to the plan.
Great. Chris, anything to add at this point?
The only thing I wanted to add is, from a public works standpoint, we're finding it's much easier to try to take over everything versus piecemeal. For instance, it gets a little confusing when you have stormwater systems that are private, and then part of it may also be public. You have private roads, you have public roads. Now you're dealing with public infrastructure under private roads, with public infrastructure under public roads. So things get really confusing, and usually if there's an emergency or something you're responding to, a lot of times, we don't have the ability to take our time and figure out who exactly owns what, and is this really what we're responsible for? And so, moving forward, Public Works now is either we take it over completely as a package, being all public, which is one of the reasons why D Street came up as being a public road, is take it all over as public infrastructure, or keep it all private, but no piecemeal type stuff, so.
Great. Gail, did you have? No. Okay.
So stormwater runoff to the north. So you mentioned about a collection pond
Yeah.
or a swale or something?
There's a
Well,
pond.
there is.
Where's,
There's a,
So there's a catch basin here that drains back to the street, and the intent of that catch basin is to take the runoff that's coming out of this area now and get it into the stormwater collection system in the street. At the first meeting, when Craig Heindel was here, I think Mark had suggested, as well as some of the neighbors through here, to make sure that there's no water continuing, or we're minimizing the amount of water that has the potential to get into their backyards, is to either construct a berm or to construct a ditch. And obviously trying to minimize the amount of clearing associated with that is to keep it along the back of the lot lines until it gets down into a point in here where it's going to flow due west and not onto the backyards of the homes along Colomer Circle.
so where will you reflect it in final?
I think we're going to incorporate, we'll have that incorporated into the plans regardless, but we've been kind of waiting to see what happens with the sewer in that area and incorporate that, because we're either going to have a sewer line going through here or a force main coming out this way, and we'd kind of kill two birds with one change there.
Houses on the northeast, that makes sense. We just have to pay particular attention to the houses on the northwest side to make sure that they don't drain into the established homes north of them. Okay.
And they've got a fair amount, as you get to
You're
the
right.
northwest, there's a fair amount of buffer there. And the water's headed,
West.
starts flipping around to the west
Starts
pretty
heading,
quickly,
which is
yeah.
good, so your smart guy just has to make sure that that doesn't make it any worse for those homeowners.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I think we have a homeowner who has something to add. You have to approach. Hi, how are you? Your name, please?
I'm Dario Gisler.
Uh-huh. Can you tell the truth?
Yes, I swear. I live at the very end of Colomer Court. I'm the very last house in the corner, and there is an incredible amount of water running. Every time we have a rainstorm, it's literally a waterfall. There was a time that I had to get in the woods with a shovel and dig a trench because it was like washing off my whole yard. I've been trying to plant grass for like years.
Can you show us where your property is?
Yeah. I live right here.
Okay.
So this is so
Actually, you're a little bit further to the east.
Yeah, that's
At the end.
Tony Supple's.
Right there.
Yep.
oh yeah, sorry,
Okay.
okay, yeah.
Yep.
So right here. So right there in this corner, the way that the lot is like two different levels almost. So it comes down like literally it's a waterfall, it washes everything. I could show you photos right now. It's like it's almost like a little, it's not a driveway, but it's like a little slope down from the yard. There is a big trench in the middle that is being just water by washing
Has
it.
it been that way since you've owned it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been feeling it and trying to plant grass, and every time it rains, it just gets all washed away.
So I don't think you were here the last time.
No, we're out of the country.
The applicant was saying that it thinks there'll be actually less stormwater flowing as a result of this than there is now. I would like to
Well, I
have,
really hope so.
let's have the applicant confirm it to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting the testimony.
Right, so currently the high point is kind of back in here with this whole area, this area draining off this way, and then the further to the west it gets, it hits the slopes, which are directing it more due west. The stormwater collection system in the street is going to pick up the front half of the roofs, as well as the front yards. So rather than having a drainage area like this, we're narrowing it down to a drainage area like this, because we've got the catch basin back here that's picking up this open space area. So the drainage area is going to be reduced. Now, we do have some rooftop that's part of that drainage area, but it'll be more than offset by the decrease in the overall area draining to that. As well as we had also talked about the rooftops on these homes here are going into an infiltration trench in the backyard. Soils aren't great there, but if those overflow, they'll have a level spreader effect. So the long and the short is
The other thing that Andy was saying is the soils in that area are really hard and dense to begin with, and that's why you're getting the runoff that you're getting in part. It's not acting like a sponge. Correct me if I say something that's wrong. And that with the sewer systems that are being, or the wastewater or stormwater, there we go, systems that are being put in, it should help. I'm just repeating.
Yeah.
I don't, you know.
And as we talked about earlier,
What happened?
Your battery go dead?
working along the back of those lots that do drain to the north and to the west, to make sure that that flow is being directed to the west, more to the west and less to the northwest. So it's not being directed toward the yard areas along Collimer Court.
So it should get better.
Okay, well, it's
But
really
won't
bad as it
eliminate
is
it.
now.
It
I
won't
don't think
eliminate
it could be any, I mean, if it's any worse, it will literally wash off my house
It
away.
won't get worse. The plans indicate it'll get better, but it won't.
Is that right?
Correct. The
You feel-
situation will get better. We're not going to eliminate the situation in any of those backyards, but we will certainly make it better by decreasing the amount of area that's draining there, and also diverting where we can the runoff to flow due west rather than northwest.
So it's not gonna get any worse.
It will definitely not get worse. It will get better, but it will not, regardless, you'll still have a certain amount of runoff that's flowing down along that property line, even
It's
if
a
we
ravine.
eliminate that area,
I
right?
mean,
Yeah, no, but
it's an
most of it's coming from the golf course. I agree.
Sure.
right, but it's an
But-
existing condition
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
that you can't
Yeah, it's
really.
just-
But your
No, no.
concern is that it'll get worse.
Yeah, I don't want it to get worse because
Right,
it's really
and the
bad.
applicant is
Yeah.
saying,
Probably
nope.
gonna-
So how can you document in your plans
Thank
whatever
you.
you're gonna do there on the north side? You talked about a trench or?
So if we resubmit preliminary plans with the sewer
Be looking for that.
route squared away, or with final plans,
Okay.
we'll have, in addition to the stormwater piping that's already here, we'll have either a combination of swale or berms through this area
See it now.
to get that area redirected to flow
Okay.
due west.
We'll be looking.
Mr. Heindel made a recommendation and we'll incorporate that as soon
Excellent.
as we know.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just taking notes, sorry. All right,
It's okay.
so that takes us to the bike path. What does the applicant have to say to us about that?
At the last meeting, Jeff Hodgson had suggested that we take advantage of the open space we have in here and
There it
kind of
is.
sweep the path out, just to provide a little bit of interesting change to the alignment there, and so we've done that. It doesn't affect things here very much. We had a couple of clusters of landscaping in there that it kind of fits well with. We did leave, at the last meeting, we had talked about adding some street trees along this area. We moved the bike path essentially to the backside, so there'll be a few trees in here between the path and Spear Street. Everywhere else, they'll be on the backside of the bike path.
Nice. Does anyone have any questions of the applicant having to do with the bike path? So what we talked about and what we're thinking about here, whether the roads are going to be 28 or 26 feet wide. Street name's going to be addressed later. Sewer, whether it goes north or south. Lighting, the applicant's going to talk to Paul some more about what type, but we understand there'll be 7 lights at intersections, and hopefully Act 250 won't give you a hard time about that. You've worked out how the access to the stormwater ponds are going to go with Chris, and then you moved the bike path a little bit. Have I summarized, based on Jeff Hodgson's suggestion, have I summarized everything that we talked about? So I would have to ask, anybody else? I'm sorry. Kate, what do we do now since we're in this kind of staged review process right now? I think we're gonna wanna go into deliberation on some of these items.
Okay.
I'm thinking street width, north, south.
Yeah.
So, but we can't,
You can do partial findings, so they won't be
Okay.
allowed to move on to final plan, but they'll have an indication of everything but
Okay.
water.
all right, so then I'm gonna make a motion at this point to recess the hearing, because we can't close it. Right?
Yes, we can.
You can close and go
Yeah, we
into
can
the
close it.
deliberative session.
But,
But it's partial.
Partial findings are
okay,
still.
all right,
closing
so
it.
then we'll close the hearing, and we're gonna go into deliberation on these issues and issue a decision that's partial. Did I get that right?
Get you closer, but not all the way
No, it's gonna
there.
be an
Gonna get you in
impartially
the-
partial
gonna
decision.
Get you in the red zone.
Is that good?
That's good.
All right,
I'll second that.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Additional business.
We
Here we
just have
go.
some decisions to sign, but we can
Yep,
do that
and then we
afterwards.
can deliberate. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, please. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. We can go off.